today I will be talking a little bit about quantitative research. Also, like Jaco said, similarly with the qualitative, there is quite a lot of information, so it is not possible within a 45 minutes to 60 minutes to go into depth with each and every concept. But all the information is in your study guides as well as your prescribed textbook. So here and there on the slides, which we will also make available, I've indicated where you can go and find more information to read up on, for example, different sampling methods. So let's start off with what is quantitative research. Jaco has summarized it quite well for us. It is basically working with numbers. It is a research strategy that focuses on quantifying the collection and analysis of data. You aim to gather a large number of numerical data that allow you to do a statistical analysis, and with that you can identify certain patterns or trends. With quantitative research, we are looking at amounts of quantities of one or more variables of interest. For example, you might want to establish the impact of working from home. That will be your one variable. On productivity levels, that will be your other variable. And we usually collect data by means of a questionnaire, such as a survey on SurveyMonkey, or if you are a doctor or a scientist, you might use other equipment or tools such as, scales or blood tests. The research paradigm in which quantitative research strategy is founded is positivism. So that's a way. What is a paradigm? Well, that is a way of us viewing the world. And with positivism, it is seeing the world and only that which we can scientifically verify with logic or mathematical proof, we recognize them. So it's not about feelings or interpretation. It is what the numbers are telling us. That is what we report on, and that is what we interpret. The researchers also assume to be independent from the object that's being studied and cannot influence it or be influenced by it. So, for example, you will send out your survey, or if you're a doctor, do your blood test. So it's not like you have any influence on it or influenced by it. Where with a qualitative study, as a researcher, you will be involved with those participants, you will interview them, so they will have an impact on the way that you are viewing the world. With quantitative research, as a researcher, you attempt to control and predict phenomena, and you might use control groups, independent and dependent variables, and terms such as predictive validity. And your statements on quantitative research is usually very impersonal and objective, so there's no feeling attached to it. For example, you'll say it's proposed that, or it is predicted that. Some of the features of quantitative research is, that you aim to classify features, count them, and construct statistical models in an attempt to explain what is observed. Jaco mentioned earlier, for example, that you only want to look at numbers. Let's say 80% of people are more productive working from home. So you're not going into too much detail. It's about the numbers and quantifying. I've already said that we use numbers and statistics, and that you are objectively separated from your study. And you usually call the people that participate in your research study respondents. And then with in qualitative, you usually call them your participants. So with quantitative, remember they are called respondents. The purpose of quantitative research is to determine the relationship between one thing and another thing within a population. So, for example, to establish the impact of working from home on the productivity levels of employees. With quantitative research, you try to search for explanations and predictions that will generalize the results to other persons and places. And you also aim to produce objective data that can be clearly communicated through statistics and numbers. The process that you follow in quantitative research mostly remain the same throughout the research process. So what you start off with usually is what you will remain focusing on right through your research process. In contrast to this, when you look at qualitative data, your research often changes as you are going through the research process. That is not the same with quantitative. It usually remains the same right through the process. Okay, then quantitative research is, Jacob showed us a very nice figure where he compared quantitative and qualitative research. And as the figure there suggested, quantitative research relies on deductive reasoning. So what is deductive reasoning? It is something that starts with an assumption that is very general or factual. It applies logic and then tests that logic to reach a conclusion. And it's usually referred to as a top-down logic because it usually starts with a very general statement and ends with a narrow, more specific conclusion. So let me show you an example of a logical, sound deductive reasoning. In your very first statement, you'll have all whales are mammals. So that's a fact, that's true. All mammals have kidneys. That's also another fact that is true. So then we can conclude if statement 1 and statement 2 is both true, then with deductive reasoning, we can conclude that all whales have kidneys. Another example is, let's say, statement 1. The person with the highest number of sales will get a performance reward at the end of the year. In statement 2, Sally has the highest number of sales for the year. We can then conclude that Sally will get a performance reward at the end of the year. Also going to just quickly touch on a hypothesis. What I want to say with a hypothesis that not you usually won't find it in a qualitative study, and even in quantitative study, you will not always use a hypothesis, but all research proposals will contain your objectives and aims and research questions. With the hypothesis, there are two main types of hypothesis, null hypothesis and then a research hypothesis. With a null hypothesis, an example of that is there will be no relationship between low self-esteem and career indecision. And an example of a research hypothesis, there will be a significant relationship between low self-esteem and career indecision. So you can see there's a slight difference about in the way that you have set these hypotheses. If you want to know a little bit more about hypothesis, you can read up in chapter 12 in your prescribed textbook and also refer to the Business Statistics Guide for more information. When we get to reporting on results in quantitative studies, you want to reduce your data to summarizing statistics, meaning means, medians, and correlations. Once again, it's very important to work through the Business Statistics Guide if you're interested in a quantitative research approach for your research study. So that guide has a lot of information and examples on how to work out means, medians, correlations, and other summarizing statistics. Also, if you use a tool such as SurveyMonkey, there are videos and tutorials available that will help you to analyze and interpret your results. It's a very nice function of SurveyMonkey is that it will give you your results in formats such as bar graphs and pie charts, and you can even pull that into your actual research report. Then I've just added the link there to SurveyMonkey, so you can go have a look there and just play around with that. I'm just going to quickly touch on the different data types that you get, which is actually touching more on statistics. So I'm going to rush through it a little bit. Data types that we usually look at is nominal scales, ordinal scales, interval scales, and ratio scales. With a nominal scale, this is your very basic scale of measurement that relates to categories. So there's no specific order attached to it. It's just a named variable. For example, a person's gender, or you have a current account, savings account, transmissions account, Also colors of course, red, blue, green, or what is the color of your eyes, blue, green, brown. Here you can see an example of coded nominal data. You've got 5 participants, the first participant being a male, and the gender code that we will assign to a male is 1. So you can see that again with participant 3, which is also male. Again, that same code that is applied to male, and then for female to other 3. With ordinal scales, it is also categorical data, but it has an implied ranking or order between the different categories. This order or ranking doesn't necessarily have the same interval in between each category. For example, it could be small, medium, and large, agree, neutral, or disagree. I just want to show you an example. For example, here it is, what is your monthly income? Less than 6,000, between 6,000 Rand and 9,999, 10,000 to 19,999, or more than 20,000. So you can see, even though there are differences, and with option 4, 20,000 is definitely more than earning 6,000 or 9,999. The intervals there is not equal. For example, with option 1, where it's less than 6,000, and option 2 is 6,000 to 9,999, it's very difficult for us to determine exactly what is the ratio in differences between option 1 and 2. With your interval scales, it includes all the properties of nominal data and ordinal data, but it allows you to measure differences in quantity or magnitude. And there's also no absolute zero starting point. Just to show you an example, it's often a Likert scale question that we use, where you ask a question and then the participant will say completely agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, completely disagree. With ratio scales, the ratio scales also have the same properties as the nominal and ordinal scales. It's named and it's ordered, and there's a proportionate interval between the variables, and it can also include an absolute 0 point, even if it's not part of your data set. So here we have an example. It's a very basic example. How many times have you been married? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then there's just a little bit of a comparison between these scales. You can also read up a little bit more about it in your prescribed study material. Jacques has started to touch on sampling. So in a quantitative perspective, what we try to do is to take a large amount of data that we can generalize to the general or bigger population. So for example, you might want to investigate certain factors that influence the work engagement or motivation, for example, in South African teachers. For you, it will be very, very difficult and impossible to reach out to each and every teacher in South Africa to participate in your research study. So therefore, you will have to use a sample that's representative of your general population. And remember, once again, with quantitative studies, it's all about the logic and following science and scientific methods to collect your data. So you will have a scientific manner in which you decide that you will draw your data from and which sample you will be using. For this, I would like you to go and study chapter 10 in your prescribed textbook for module 7. It will also give you more information about your main sampling methods. As Jacques has explained in our previous session, quantitative research study usually use random sampling methods. Remember again, quantitative studies is about the science and the logic. So let's say you have 100 students in your class that that is your population. So each student will have the exact same chance or opportunity to be selected for your research study. Whereas with a more convenient type of study with your qualitative study, you might choose to only interview certain of your students that you know is facing certain issues that is of interest, like Jaco said, makes them experts in the specific field that you are conducting your studies in. With qualitative studies, we usually look at the trustworthiness of your research, and in quantitative studies, we focus on reliability and validity of the research and the research results. So reliability is about getting the same results every time you do the test. So if it's to the extent that your results are accurate, consistent, and stable. So let's say you weigh yourself on your scale and you weigh 60 kilograms, and you weigh yourself on another scale, and that also gives 60 kilograms, then you know that is a reliable outcome, and that the scales that you are using is also reliable, that it's not faulty. If scale A, for example, gave 100 kilograms, where scale B gave 60 kilograms, then we know that something is not right. One of these tests that you use, either scale A or scale B, is not reliable. There's also different types of reliability. I'm not going to go into it now. You can study chapter 13 in your prescribed textbook to read up more about the different types of reliability. Then in a nutshell, validity is the extent to which a research design is scientifically sound or appropriately conducted. So the validity is, you want to know, does that thing that you have tested or measured, is that what you were intending to measure? So let's say that your research is about asking, investigating productivity, then the questions that you need to ask and the questionnaire that you set up have to relate to issues in terms of productivity. It can't measure other items such as wellness. So for a test to be valid, it needs to measure what you intend it to measure. Then we get to our data analysis. For this, you will have to go and work through the business statistics support guide, all those examples that you have. Main method for analyzing quantitative research data is through a statistical analysis. And we have two main branches for statistical analysis, namely descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. With descriptive statistics, you aim to describe your data set. So you want to know averages, mean, median, mode, standard deviations, all terms that you can go and read up on in the business statistics support guide. So yeah, descriptive statistics, like the word just suggests, descriptive means to describe. So you want to go and describe your data set. For example, 80% of your participants have reported that they have struggled with burnout during the hard lockdown. With inferential statistics, you aim to make a prediction about the population, such as the differences between groups and the relationships between variables. After you've collected your data, analyzed it, you need to interpret it. So you need to put it into context when you report on your data. So you can't just say 80% of lecturers have experienced burnout while working from home. You need to put it into context. What does it mean? And when you interpret, you can't just put your own feelings and interpretation to that. You have to perhaps link it to something in the literature to try and explain your findings. Just to summarize, our quantitative research is mostly about a large amount of data that you collect with the purpose to identify trends. It's grounded in positivism. That is about following logic and scientific methods. You will use random sampling methods. And your research method and data collection methods must be reliable and valid. and you will use statistical methods to analyze and report on your research results. And there's just Azan's information there.